All right. I think I'm going to go ahead and get things started. Let me move this along here. Hello, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me here today. I don't see anyone in the chat quite yet, but that is to be expected. No worries there. Sure, people will trickle in shortly here. Thank you so much for joining me today. I know it's been a few weeks. Uh, Magical, that's a great question. Thank you for being here. Magical just asked in the chat, do I call you Kavi or do you have a new name? That's actually something that I wanted to talk about today, and I will get to that, I promise. Shia is here as well. Hello, hello. Already using the new name. Thank you for being here, and thanks for being in the chat. Okay, so I wanted to just catch up and check in and say hi and let y'all know what I've been up to these past few weeks since I haven't been really streaming or online or doing all of that much. But first of all, of course, as always, I like to see how all of you are doing. And I still want to know that. I would love to know how all of y'all are doing. How are all of you doing? It's been a few weeks. I hope y'all have had a pretty good August so far. I think it has been at least 3 weeks since I last streamed. So, hope you had a good end of your July, having a good summer. Is anyone doing anything fun for the summer? Anyone just sort of chilling? Or people going back to school now? That might be a thing that people are doing. If you're going back to school, then best of luck to you. I hope that it's a great start to your year and that things go well. It's been a while since I've been in school, but I remember those times. Yeah, thank you all for being here so far. Really, really, really appreciate it. It's been an interesting time for me. So, part of what I have been so busy with has been doing a lot of self reflection. And actually, before I even get to that, I want to back up even more. What have I been actually up to? So, I have been working on a video. I have mentioned that I've been working on this video for a while now. For anyone who's paying attention, you know what the video is about already. It is another Your Favis Trans. It is about Gwen Stacy from Into the Spider-Verse. I have been working on this script pretty much since that movie came out, which was like, what, 2022, 2023? I don't remember when exactly that movie came out, but it's been a while. I've been working on it for about a year. The reason it's not done yet is for a lot of kind of internal conflict reasons. There was a part of me that wanted to make it as good as possible. There was a part of me that wanted it to be better than my previous videos, and I had kind of a vision for it. And as much as I love the Into the Spider-Verse movie, it's also like not necessarily my favorite movie of all time. Like, it's a great movie, don't get me wrong, and no offense to anyone who does love it, but like it's just not my favorite movie. And so I didn't love it in the same way, for example, that I loved Infinity Train, where for Infinity Train it was very easy for me to make videos because of how much I loved it and because of how much I wanted to talk about it. And that same level of passion just wasn't there for me for Into the Spider-Verse. So I've been working on this video slowly but surely. It's still coming along. I still think it's going to be a good video, but I just haven't had the same motivation to work on it. And also, frankly, like, I haven't had the time to prioritize it because I do have a full-time job and I do have these other things that I'm working on right now. So it's still a work in progress, but I haven't given up on it yet. I still want to get it done. I still want to finish it. I still want to get it up on the channel. So that is one thing that I'm working on, sort of. Magical says, not so great since my parents got sick last week. Thankfully, my mom is starting to get better, but my dad might take a little longer to recover. That is really unfortunate. I'm sorry to hear that, Magical. Glad to hear that your mom is starting to feel better. Hope that your dad is able to recover soon as well too, and best of luck for you. I know it's tough when family is sick, but glad to hear that at least your mom is starting to get a little bit better. I hope that she continues to get better and your dad gets better as well. Another thing that I have been working on is actually my plans for my 30th birthday, which is wild to say out loud, but it's coming up next month. And I don't typically celebrate my birthday that often. But I'm turning 30. It's kind of like a quote unquote big deal for, for some people. But I also feel like turning 30 is somewhat of an accomplishment for me, surviving this many years for this long. I feel like is something worth celebrating. And so I am planning a little bit of an event. Yeah, of course, Magical. You're so very welcome. I'm planning a little bit of an event and get together for some friends of mine. And I am sometimes I get like these ideas, right? And I get like so excited about them. And then I decide to just like put my whole heart and soul into it. And I have no idea how it's going to turn out. And that's kind of how I was when I first started this channel, right? But anyway, I'm working on this like dropout themed party right now where I'm like planning all these like games and activities that are going to be based off of the Dropout streaming service and the shows on there. So it should be a fun time. It should be, a not too serious time. Maybe about like 4 or 5 of my friends who are in town are going to be available. Maybe a few more depending on if they're able to like travel and make it from out of town, which I'm still sort of waiting to hear back on. But yeah, it should be a fun time. But I'm also planning on taking a little bit of time off during that week of my birthday, which by the way, my actual birthday is September 16th. So it's less than a month away. And September 14th, which is a Saturday, is when I'm planning for this party to be. And then sometime during the week of September 16th, maybe actually Monday, September 16th itself, I would love to do some sort of a stream. I know I've streamed for my birthday before in the past. I don't remember if I did it last year or not. I don't think I did. I remember I did it. We were playing Tears of the Kingdom, I think, during a birthday stream. I don't remember if that was last year or the year before. It's all such a blur at this point. But yeah, I would like to do some sort of stream again for my birthday. Maybe I literally I don't have any ideas for it right now. I have to think of something. I have about a month to think of it. So we'll think of something. If anyone has any ideas, let me know. Send me a message. But yeah, I would like to do something fun for my birthday online and do a stream or something as well too. So, keep your eyes out for that. I'll post it when it comes along. And now I guess kind of like let's talk about the elephant in the room. So I have been thinking a lot lately about changing my name. And this has first of all, I want to I'm gonna get a little vulnerable on stream here. I hope y'all don't mind. And this is a little difficult for me because I tend to get very hesitant when it comes to sharing, and I always worry that I'm oversharing and that like people don't actually like care about what I have to say or what I'm going through. And I know that that's sort of a somewhat silly fear that obviously, since you all are here and listening to me, you have to care to some extent. So I appreciate that. Again, thank you for being here. But yeah, I do get scared a little bit sometimes to get vulnerable, and I would like to get a little bit vulnerable with you all today, if that is okay with everyone here. Again, thank you for, allowing me this space and for being here and for being so supportive and encouraging as you always are. Just wanted to reiterate that and appreciate it and say thank you again. So thank you. And you've been feeling the same way, Magical. That's interesting. Yeah, I would love to hear more about your experience. But I want to back up a little bit and talk a little bit about my name and sort of how I got here and got to this point. So I first came out as trans back in like 2015, 2016. 2015 was when I was sort of starting to explore my gender identity in this way. And like in this more conscious way. And 2016-ish is when I sort of started to come out to more people, starting to let my friends and family know that I am trans. And when I was first sort of questioning my gender, I was so unsure and I was so worried that I was just sort of like making up this fake identity in my head that I was just sort of like latching onto for one reason or another. And when I was in college, I was seeing a counselor at the time, not really like a official therapist, but like a mental health counselor. And I brought this up to my counselor at the time, and I was like, "Hey, by the way, I am sort of questioning my gender identity, and I don't really know what to do about that." And he suggested that I go to a trans support group that was being held weekly on campus, and it was being sort of run and moderated by one of the other counselors that was working with him at the time. We had like 3 counselors on campus, and so one of the other counselors was facilitating this support group. She herself was not trans. She was cisgender, but she was an ally. And all of the students that were either trans or questioning were welcome to join this weekly support group. And we could talk about our experiences and get to hear from other people. And this was really a huge lifesaver for me in college. And if you are out there questioning your gender identity or questioning your sexuality, questioning your identity in any which way, I highly, highly recommend peer support groups. I feel like they're so underrated and can be incredibly helpful. And that being said, I think that being mindful about who is in your support group and being critical of who is in your support group is also incredibly important. What I mean by that is, while I undeniably am grateful for the support and the exploration and the self-discovery that I was able to do while I was in the support group, the college that I went to was incredibly white. Like, there's no kind of futzing around that. It was an incredibly different culture than the one I was brought up in and the one that I was used to and the one that I'm in right now, right? Like, I am currently living in the area that I grew up in. I went away for college for 4 years to this very rural, white, not very diverse area, and frankly quite conservative area. And it was a very different demographic that I was surrounded with. And most of the students that were in my support group were also white. There was like one other Asian student, but they also weren't South Asian. They were like East Asian of some kind. And I think they were Chinese or something. It's not that I can't tell the difference between Asian people. I just don't remember because it was so many years ago. But it's really important for me to look back and remember that now, because the support group did fail me in certain ways as being a South Asian person in this very white support group. There were going to be certain things that other people were not going to understand or be able to relate to me in my specific experiences of my journey. And one of these experiences, right, was trying to figure out a new name for myself. And this was something that I had been thinking about when I even first came out all those years ago, because the first thing that I realized when I first kind of came to terms, like, okay, yes, I am trans. I don't identify with the gender I identify with at birth, but what does that actually mean? What do I identify with? What are the labels that are like available to me and like feel good to me when I try them on? And the first thing I sort of realized about myself was that I liked he, him pronouns. Like, I knew that I didn't like she, her pronouns because those were the ones that were assigned to me at birth. And I wanted to distance myself away from she, her pronouns, right? I wanted to assert my gender nonconformity. I wanted to assert my transness, my queerness. And so I wanted to not use she, her pronouns, which are the ones I was assigned at birth. And I knew I didn't want to use they, them pronouns. Nothing against they, them pronouns. I think that it's wonderful that people use they, them pronouns. I fully support all of my friends and peers and anyone who uses they them pronouns. I'm happy to use they them pronouns for other people. They just didn't feel like it fit for me. It just wasn't my pronouns. So I didn't want to use them for myself, and I didn't want other people using them to refer to me. For whatever reason, right? Like, it just felt a little clunky. It just, like, didn't feel like it fit quite right, right? Like, it's very personal, right? People decide their pronouns based off of just, like, what feels good to them, and they, them just didn't feel good to me, and so I decided I didn't want to use them. But I wanted to distance myself from she, her. I wanted to assert my transness in some way, shape, or form, and so I said, okay, great. He, him, it is, right? Like, that's kind of the default left option that I had. Hey there, Tune. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate you stopping by. You caught me in the middle of a very personal, vulnerable story that I'm telling right now. So when I was in this support group, I was able to explore and try on pronouns, different identities, different labels, decided that I really liked using he, him pronouns. And then there came the question of changing my name, because that's sort of the typical trans journey that people find themselves on, is they figure out they're trans, they change their pronouns, they change their name, they change the way they dress, and then they sort of do the medical transition if that's what they're interested in doing. And I came to this support group and was like, hey, I'm thinking about changing my name, but I don't know what I want to change my name to. I don't really have any names that I like. And a lot of people, when they decide to change their names, and of course, this isn't everybody, but this was a very common experience for the trans people that I was friends with and the trans people that I knew, was that people would choose a name based off of a character or a person or some other, like, being that they identified with, that they resonated with, that they felt a connection with. The problem that is, or the problem that I had, was that growing up as an Asian American, growing up as an Indian American, I was mostly surrounded by culture that didn't belong to me. It was obviously mostly white culture. Of course, there was some black culture in there. And, like, of course, there was some Asian culture, but, like, Asian American culture, I feel like, was just not the mainstream, and, like, was not having representation, and, like, really doesn't have representation still. Like, there still needs to be more Asian American representation, but, you know, up until my life at that point, there really wasn't any, and almost zero, like, South Asian representation, right? South Asian American representation, I should say. And so I really didn't have any characters or any, like, people that I closely identified with, whose name I also identified with, right? Like, obviously there are characters that I love and identified with growing up, but, like, I'm not about to name myself after Ron Stoppable. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't fit me. That doesn't work with who I am and my background and my heritage is something that's important to me and something that I've had to learn to love about myself. I had to unlearn a lot of internalized racism that I had, and I had to actively relearn how to appreciate and love this part of myself that I, like, hated for so long. So none of the other kids in my group experienced internalized racism. None of the other kids in my support group experienced this, like, othering feeling when it came to their race, right? Like, they always had that to sort of fall back on as something that they could identify with the mainstream media, I should say. Sorry if I'm not being very clear in my language. I'm just trying my best to articulate some of these, like, very vague feelings that I have. But this was an experience that these other students really couldn't understand. And I I also myself couldn't understand that they couldn't understand, because I was still unpacking my internalized racism. I was still unpacking what being South Asian American meant to me specifically, especially in this culture. So there was a lot of disconnect, not only from the other students and myself, but also me from myself. And like, there's no way I could have known that at the time, right? I was just some stupid, like, 20-year-old kid who like didn't know shit. And so I went to the support group and I was like, hey, I'm thinking of changing my name, but I don't know what I want to change my name to. My birth name is typically a very feminine name, and I just feel like it doesn't really fit me. But at the same time, I never really had a negative relationship with my name. It was always something that I really liked. Whenever I introduced myself to people, a response that I would often get is people would say, "Oh, wow, that's a really pretty name." And so I actually had quite a positive association with my name, which, like, again, isn't the kind of typical trans experience that is the mainstream narrative, right? Like, most oftentimes you hear trans people talk about how they hated their names, and whenever they heard people refer to them as their names, it made them like cringe and die inside. And like, that was just never my experience. I always really liked my name. I always like was really happy when people complimented my name. And so it felt weird to be in this position where I felt like I had to change it and felt like I had to give up this part of myself that I actually liked. And I brought all this up to the support group, and one of the white kids responded back to me and said, "Well, when I hear that name, I don't inherently ascribe a gender to it. I sort of hear it as a neutral name. It's not like inherently masculine or feminine when I first hear that name." And looking back at that, I do think that that is a little bit silly, because I feel like my name just was very obviously feminine, whether or not you were familiar with the ethnicity or not. I feel like it was just very obviously a feminine name. And like, yeah, maybe that could have somewhat applied to me while I was in college, while I was in this culture where I was mostly surrounded by white people. But like, as soon as I left college and as soon as I came back home, where I was surrounded again with a more diverse population, with the other South Asian people, it it became very clear that it was a feminine name, and most of the people around me were going to read it as such. And so I sort of accepted it at the time. I was like, okay, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I don't have to change my name if I don't want to. And of course, there are lots of trans people that don't change their name, right? Like, there are plenty of trans people that are perfectly happy with the name that they were born with, or maybe they were born with a more gender neutral sounding name, and so they are happy to keep it. And so that's kind of what I thought was going on with me. I was like, okay, maybe I just am happy with my name and I don't need to change it. And I was fine with that for a very long time. I'm going to take a sip of water because I've been talking a lot. Talk amongst yourselves. Okay. Where was I? So I had pretty much accepted that I wanted to keep my name, and it was fine. And then when I came back home after college and I was back in a more diverse population with other South Asian people, they were seeing my name and and reading it as feminine and reading me as feminine. And this started to make me like really uncomfortable, but like not in a way I was like fully conscious of. And so what ended up sort of happening subconsciously is that I would lean into my femininity even if I didn't want to. Tune says, "So I've talked to you about New Wish when I started, and I'm sure you've heard much more about it since." New Wish. Oh yeah, Fairly Odd Parents, right? Yeah, for sure. I actually have been wanting to watch it. I've been like seeing clips of it float up on my Twitter timeline and stuff like that, and it just looks really good. And I really do genuinely want to watch it. So as soon as it hits streaming or whatever, I don't know if it is on streaming or anything already, but when it hits streaming, I do genuinely want to watch it. Where was I talking about my name? So, so I had just sort of accepted and just wanted to keep my name. I came back home after college. People started referring to me as my birth name, and just making me feel uncomfortable. And then I started doing this sort of unconscious, insidious thing to myself, where I was assuming that people were reading me as feminine, and because I was operating under this like expectation of what other people were thinking of me, I was leaning into that expectation to try to avoid any sort of uncomfortable reaction or any sort of like awkwardness in the conversation, or like, heaven forbid, like confrontation or like violence, right, from like the other person if they're like realizing that I'm a trans person. So I was like kind of unconsciously afraid of that, and afraid of getting like rejected by this other person, or like just having some sort of awkward interaction. And so I would like bend myself backwards to try to fit myself into what I imagined the other person was expecting me to act like, to sound like, to look like, to behave like, right? And this is like fucking exhausting, and it's really not a healthy way to interact with the world. And to be perfectly honest, I was kind of doing that with YouTube and with like my online content creating and stuff too, because I created all these Infinity Train videos and I had so much fun making it. And then I sort of locked myself into this like niche that I then felt obligated to stick to. And even though I've like had ideas for videos that may be like outside of talking about animation or even talking about like media, right? Like there's some video ideas I've had which are just like personal essays that I kind of just like want to talk about, like certain things going on in like my life and like observations that I've made, right? Like about the world. And I like didn't feel like I could make those kind of videos because I was like, oh, what if my audience hates it? What if what if nobody watches it, right? Like there's this fear of being rejected for like doing what you want to do, being who you want to be, creating what you want to create. Which kind of leads me into something else that I wanted to talk about, but let me read the chat here, what Toon is saying. Not on streaming right now, and all we know is it's going to be on Netflix, at least internationally. Unsure about domestic. Okay, for sure. Yeah, once it's available, I mean, I'm sure I could find it online somewhere, right? Like even if it's not legal, I'm sure I can find it. But yeah. So I lately, I'm gonna kind of shift gears a little bit, but I promise that this all kind of connects. Lately, I have been very unhappy with my life circumstances, and I don't think that this is a unique feeling. I want to be careful with my wording here, but I've been at my current job for the past like 5 years or so, since I had graduated college. I got like, I worked like some part-time jobs in between. And then eventually got this full-time job, and I've been here for about 5 years. And this is kind of like the longest. Yeah, no worries, Toon. I appreciate it. This is kind of the longest that I've been like kind of doing one thing for a while. And I think it's not an uncommon feeling among like millennials and older Gen Z and people who are sort of newer to the workforce, right? Where they graduate college, they get this full-time job, and then they are not earning enough, right? So it's like, I'm barely able to like put stuff away in savings. I have to live somewhat paycheck to paycheck. Like, I live somewhat comfortably, right? Like I'm very grateful for my salary and my paycheck and everything, but like I don't like live this lavish, luxurious lifestyle, right? Like I live in this tiny apartment by myself and budget very carefully and don't overspend and um I also do my best to like donate to causes that I care about or mutual aid or uh creative artists projects, kickstarters and stuff that I like want to see, right? Like I there's so much that I wish I could do with my money that I have to like budget and be careful about. um and so I'm very grateful for my job, and I've learned so much at my job and I've grown so much while I'm there. But I feel like it's a very common feeling with our generation of us being like, is this really all that life has to offer us? Like, do we just have to like get up early in the morning, force ourselves to eat breakfast, go to work, come home, maybe exercise a little bit because like it's supposed to be good for us, eat dinner, and then it's so late at night that we already have to like get ready for the next day, and then like it's all the same thing all over again, right? Like, and it just feels like so exhausting and so pointless. And like you're on this treadmill that's just like not going anywhere. And it leads to this feeling of like exhaustion and burnout and depression, to be perfectly honest. Like again, like I'm being a little vulnerable here, but I started asking myself, right? Like, is this all that life has to offer? Is this the best that life has to offer? um is there a point to trying for more? Is there anything more? Do I just sort of have to accept my fate that like I'm just going to be kind of stressed and tired and miserable for the rest of my life, because what other option is there, right? And so I was getting just like so depressed for a really long time. Yeah, Tune, definitely donating a lot to indie projects. I feel you. Yeah, Patreon as well too. I feel like there's so many people I wish I could support on Patreon, so many amazing creators. Um but I like have to limit myself. I'm like, dang, I can't spend more than like 20, $50 a month on Patreon. It's like it's too much. Um and I was getting really depressed with life, and at the same time, right? Like even with my gender, I was starting to think like, is this kind of the best that I could get? Like people are just always going to be misgendering me. People are always going to treat me in this kind of like weird infantilizing way. I feel like anti-trans masculinity manifests itself a lot of times in like infantilization, in erasure, in um in silencing, right? And I was feeling so depressed about that, and life felt so out of control. It felt so out of my control, right? And not even just like gender and job. I mean, like think about like the world, right? Like fucking Donald Trump becoming president. Like I feel like all this started kind of in 2016 when I graduated college, right? Like it just so happened that the world chaos and my internal chaos and my life chaos were kind of all lining up around the same time. But like Donald Trump becoming president, fucking COVID pandemic, genocide in Gaza, like all these huge events, right, that are just like leading me to this conclusion that like life is this chaotic, harsh, horrible thing that I have no control over, and like I'm just stuck at this crappy job where I have to like get up early and be tired and like do this work that I don't care about, and not feel like I'm learning or growing, and that I'm like just stuck in this like one place and I'm just going to be here for the rest of my life. I was like really in a dark place when it came to all this stuff. And part of what I wanted to do to try to hopefully help myself a little bit was so I've also been like in therapy, of course, and I took some time off work to focus on my mental health, and was seeing a therapist, was seeing a psychiatrist, I was taking medication. um getting very real here. And I'm still doing it. I'm still seeing my therapist and doing all this stuff. But Tune says, I feel like we're only now starting to see nature begin to heal after dwindling into insanity since 2016. In some ways, Tune, yes, but in some ways it's also like just getting worse, right? I mean, like, I feel like transphobia and transmisogyny, like, even like, I talk about this every year when Trans Day of Visibility comes around, but like trans visibility is such a double-edged sword, right? Like, on one hand, yeah, it's great that we're getting so much representation, that like conversations about gender are more mainstream and more normalized. Like, I think that's all wonderful and like really great progress. But at the same time, right, like, we are getting more and more anti-trans legislation introduced in local and broader governments, and like fucking people like Elon Musk and Joling Coling Rolling are out here espousing so much bullshit and misinformation, causing so many people to like just normalize this hatred of trans people. And so, yeah, I agree with you that there is a lot of progress that has been made, but a lot of regression has been made too, and a lot of progress still needs to get done. And it can sometimes just feel very overwhelming. And yeah, exactly, with alt-right media kind of just being so prominent, it can feel overwhelming, right? And so one thing that I started doing a few months ago was actually starting a meditation practice. And I had been so hesitant to start meditating for so long. And actually, to be perfectly fair to me, I had tried and given up on meditation for so long for so many different reasons. Like, for one thing, it was something that like my mom wanted me to do. And I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like this natural inclination to rebel against anything my mom tells me to do. So like, if my mom tells me to start meditating, I'm automatically just going to be like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to do what my mom tells me to do. Um but also, like, I had tried meditating. I felt like I had been taught certain practices and had been trying them, and it didn't really work for me, quote unquote, whatever that means, right? It just like didn't feel good. It didn't feel helpful. It felt frustrating, and I didn't enjoy doing it. So I gave up for a really long time. Uh Magical says, all the chaos in the world just stresses me out too. I feel the same about politics. Yeah, for sure. And to be clear, I'm not saying that I'm suddenly like mentally healthy now and totally stress free. I still have all this overwhelm and anxiety a lot. But like I said, I've been doing meditation, and some of the practices that I was doing before was not working for me. And so I decided, okay, I'm going to give it another honest to God, real chance and actually stick with it. Cause like all the times I had tried before, like I had done it for like maybe a week or two and then like just given up, right? But like, in order to see the benefits of meditation, you really have to be doing it consistently for like a month, 2 months, several months, right? So I was like, okay, everyone's always telling me that this is the solution. I've tried and given up so many times, but let's actually try. Let's actually commit to it. Let's actually stay consistent with it. And so for the past few months, I have been doing a meditation practice. And this was a practice that I learned from a YouTube video, actually. And the YouTube video was specifically talking about a very particular exercise, meditation exercise that someone can do in this type of exercise is particularly helpful for someone who has ADHD, which is the reason I even clicked on the video in the first place. I was like, okay, well, maybe this will be something that is a little bit more helpful for me with someone who has ADHD. And basically, the exercise, they call it Om chanting. So like, Om is, you might have heard, it's kind of like an Indian word. Sometimes people use Om to refer to as like the word for God. But there's a lot of kind of spiritual, logical practical reasons why that word or that sound is used. But one of the reasons is because it's the natural sound that we make with our mouths if we open our mouths and then close our mouths. So basically this exercise is a chanting exercise where you breathe in and you do a chant, and the chant, you say the word Om, but you start with your mouth open and then you slowly close your mouth until it's all the way closed. And that's like how you do the chant. So I'll give you an example for it right now. So basically you would go and then you would do that several times. And the intention with this exercise is to pay attention to the vibrations and the physical feelings that you experience as you are changing the shape of your mouth and as you are noticing how the air is flowing within you. And I find that this exercise is a lot easier for me to do than just your typical like sitting there and like just trying to like focus on your breathing like with your eyes closed, because it actually like gives you an activity, and by you I mean me. It gives me an activity to focus on, and it's a lot easier to just sort of like have this one activity to focus on rather than try to focus on this like very particular breathing and like then get distracted with like my internal thoughts. Like this is enough of an activity that's like more involved than just breathing, that it has allowed me to be able to focus on the actual practice and like not get distracted with my own thoughts. Magical says you felt the vibration when you did that. Yeah. And so when you do it for yourself, you'll like feel how the vibrations, and the reason that it's good for people with ADHD in particular too, is because people with ADHD are very sensitive, right, to external stimuli. Like if something is going on over here, right, I'm going to be very easily distracted by whatever is happening. And so when you're doing this chanting, every time that you do it, it's going to be a little bit different. There's going to be a subtle difference in the vibration, in the way that your air is moving within you. And because people with ADHD are very sensitive to that stimuli, people with ADHD are able to notice these subtleties a lot more easily than, say, someone without ADHD. And they're able to sort of have mastery over this practice a little bit easier than someone without ADHD. And so I was like, okay, let's give it a try. Let's see. Toon says, I didn't even know that this was a thing people actually did. I just always saw it in cartoons. Yeah, no, it is very, it's been extremely helpful for me, I would say. And so when I started doing this meditation exercise, my goal with it kind of was, I wanted to find an answer, right? And I know that that sounds ridiculous, but I wanted to find an answer to what would make my life not suck. And I wanted to figure out like, okay, does that mean I have to like figure out what my dream job is, right? Like, what is my passion? What is my career? What is something that I'm like willing to work hard for and also be able to make money and a living and income on, right? Like I wanted to figure out what this golden perfect answer was. Like what is my life's purpose, essentially, was like the question I wanted to get answered, right? And so I was like, okay, hopefully as I meditate, I will be able to come up with an answer to this question, or maybe something will come to me. I can tell you that didn't happen. I definitely don't know what my passions are. I definitely don't know what I want to do with my life. I don't know what my purpose is. I don't know what the answers are. That's not what I ended up getting out of meditation, which is on one hand disappointing, because I think that wouldn't my life just be so much easier if I were to figure out what the answer to that question was. So it's disappointing to not have that answer. But at the same time, I think, and to be fair, I don't actually know how true this is. I'm just sort of like attributing this to meditation because it's something that I've been trying. But this could also very much have to do with the fact that like I've been doing therapy, and I've been like talking to someone every week. I've been trying to like do more journaling, right? And just sort of like doing more introspection and more reflection in general. So this could be because of the meditation. This could be because of like all this other stuff. But basically meditation has helped me recognize these like patterns and motifs that have been occurring to me in my past, and helping me connect them to themes, ideas, struggles, goals, challenges that I currently have in my present. And so as I was meditating and realizing like, okay, I'm struggling to imagine a future for myself. I'm struggling to imagine what I can even do in the future. Like I'm struggling to understand what is actually within my control and what is not in my control, and to what extent I can actually manipulate the circumstances that I am in to slowly start making steps to improve my life, to eventually get to a future where maybe I do have a job that I'm happier with. Maybe I do have friends and connections, or a partner, maybe, you know, who knows, in the future that I am like happy with. And getting to this place, I'm understanding now, is not going to be a matter of there's a golden answer out there that's going to solve all my problems and answer all my questions and give me my life's purpose. What I'm understanding is that it's less like we are an archaeologist that is like digging through the earth trying to excavate and find this golden answer. It's more like someone who's digging through the earth and gathering this clay and is sculpting it into something and building it into something that they're envisioning. And is it going to be perfect on the first time around? Probably not, but that's like life, right? Like that's the difference between a setback and a failure, is like you just got to keep going, right? You just got to keep trying. And so I kind of was connecting all of these ideas, right, of being so tied to, or not tied, but being so attached to other people's expectations of me, and being so caught up in not wanting to be rejected, not wanting to have other people's reactions of me outside of my control, right? So it's about understanding like what's in my control, what's outside of my control. Other people's reactions to me is always going to be outside of my control. So I had this like fear of like, okay, I need to be able to control this. And so I would bend myself backwards, twist myself into a knot to attempt, right? Because it's actually impossible to meet other people's standards and expectations, but I would bend myself backwards to attempt to meet other people's standards and expectations. And so it didn't, it led to being exhausted, right? It just led to being completely tired and burnt out. And so I'm recognizing that like this need to, or this habit that I have to compromise myself and my authenticity and my desires for other people's expectations, comfort, whatever it may be, just so I can feel like I have some semblance of control over other people. But I don't have control over other people, and I should try to let go of that and just do my best to be myself and let the right people gravitate towards me because of that. And that realization is something I'm working on internalizing and working on understanding. It's still very hard in the moment when, you know, I'm talking to a stranger and someone calls me ma'am, right? To try to correct them. Like it's terrifying. But I'm working on it. I'm doing my best. And part of that process has been realizing and deciding that I actually do want to change my name. And it's taking me many years to get to this point. You know, it's so funny to me that it has taken me this long, and that I've sort of had this very windy journey up until this point when it comes to my gender and realizing my identity. Because, I realized I was trans and changed my pronouns to he, him. Eventually, after a long time and after a lot of struggle, finally ended up being able to start hormone therapy and medically transitioning. And then years after that, being able to get top surgery. And then, there's one more thing that I actually wanted to talk about too. So, something that has also tied into meditation and tied into me coming to terms with this idea of building my identity instead of like discovering what my identity is. I've actually been doing vocal training lately as well too, and I'm not sure if this comes across, but I do feel like I speak a little bit differently now. But for the past couple of months, I've been doing vocal training. I've been working with a coach and doing sessions every couple of weeks and doing these daily exercises. He's been giving me these exercises to do that are basically like singing exercises and different vocal exercises, but I'm supposed to be practicing them every day. And there's a lot of interesting crossover between meditation and these vocal training exercises that I'm doing, because vocal training as well also kind of includes these components of like doing these exercises and paying attention to the vibrations and the airways that are sort of occurring within you. And so like in this like self-discovery process and in this like self building process of like doing vocal training and coming up with this new name for myself, it's been just so interesting to see how these things have overlapped and the crossover in my life and like the parallels between figuring out my identity in what I want to do with my life, like in terms of work and creativity and passion and income. And then also like, who do I actually want to be when I'm talking to people? Who do I want to be when I introduce myself to people? Who do I want to be when I am using my voice to speak about something, right? Like these are all these intertwining ideas and questions that have folded together for me in this like spiritual practice that includes meditation and vocal training, which has just been like so cool. And really positive, honestly. And all this to say, I have settled mostly on this name, Vikram, Vikram. Vic for short is also fine. I'm like 95% happy with this name. I've been like looking for names. I've been looking at names for weeks, maybe months now at this point. There's like all those baby name lists that are out there. I've probably looked at hundreds of names at this point, and there isn't really a name that I like better. I feel like Vikram is just the nice balance between something that means a lot to me, like something that kind of has a sentimental value to it, as well as just being kind of like a nice sounding name. Like I feel like it just rolls off the tongue and has a nice mouth feel, I guess you could say. So yeah, please call me Vikram or Vic for short. I'm still fine right now with the name Covey. I'm not going to be like offended or mad or upset if anyone still calls me that. I'm still kind of like also thinking of like, oh gosh, I have to come up with like a new username and like a new YouTube channel name and all this other stuff too, right? So like all these things sort of have to like come to me in time. But yeah, I think I have like mostly settled on this name. I feel like the kind of last 5% of the way to get to 100% liking this name is really just gonna have to come down to getting used to it and getting used to introducing myself with the name, getting used to other people referring to me with this name, hearing it, seeing it written out loud or seeing it written, whether it's on a screen or whatever. So I think I'm pretty settled on it and pretty happy with it, and think that once I kind of get used to it a little bit more, I will sort of get the rest of the way there. But that's sort of where I'm at right now. I know that was kind of a lot, and maybe not all of it was incoherent, or not all of it was coherent, I should say. Um and I want to make a video about this actually eventually. I have some ideas about what it could potentially look like, and what might be a fun thing to do to kind of tell this story, cuz like there is a story here, right? Like I hate to try to like turn my life into a story, cuz I mean life is just life. It doesn't always have to make sense. But I feel like I love stories so much, and I love analyzing characters and analyzing themes and motifs, and being able to turn that inward and recognize these themes and motifs within my own life and have it lead to these ideas of self-discovery, of self-determination, has just been very fascinating. And I hope that for the few of you who have stuck around for the stream, you kind of got something out of it, and maybe find it interesting. But I do eventually want to write this out in a more coherent way, and potentially make a video about it as well too, because I don't know, maybe it can be relatable for some people. Uh maybe it'll resonate. Maybe it'll just give someone an idea of what my experience is like for them to empathize with. And you know, I always have the belief that the more people share their stories, the more interesting the world becomes. And I particularly especially believe that to be true for trans and queer people, for people of color, for any sort of marginalized people who typically don't get to have their voices heard or their stories told. And I guess I should put my money where my mouth is, right? And sort of tell my story and be more open in that way, because not only do I think that it will be helpful for other people, but I think to some extent it'll be helpful for me too, because I think that the journey that I'm on right now, and the biggest kind of mental roadblock that I'm slowly chipping away at and working through, is this idea of letting go of other people's expectations of me, and being able to build that internal confidence and that own internal trust in myself, to be able to say to myself, no, I think I'm on the right path, and I think I'm still going to be okay, even if everything around me and if the world is sort of insinuating that I'm not going to be, or that I should be doing something else instead, or that I my ideas are not worth listening to, or that I'm being ridiculous, right? Like I really have to, I'm really at this point right now where I'm trying to build my own confidence, build my own trust in myself, to be able to block out the noise and block out the haters and block out maybe even people who have good intentions for me, but like aren't in my shoes, right? Like I get lots of advice from like very well-meaning people, right? Who say like, hey, you should apply for this kind of job, or hey, you should like not talk about your gender in this way to these people because like X, Y, and Z, right? Like very well-intentioned for my own kind of like safety and well-being. Um, but I feel like sometimes I have my own self-doubt and end up folding to those other and those other suggestions, when really I should be building my own mental fortitude and building my own confidence and faith and trust in myself, to be able to say like, hey, I know that you're coming from a good place, but I don't think that what you're saying applies to me, and I'm going to do my own thing anyway, right? And whether or not this is the right quote unquote move for me, it's going to be something I figure out eventually. Whatever it looks like, it'll get figured out eventually. And that's sort of where I'm at right now and where I'm trying to like sort of internalize and come to. Whew. That was a lot. How are y'all doing? How's everyone doing? Has there been anyone in the Twitch chat? I don't well someone in Twitch has been telling me to hydrate. So here you go. Here you go, Denopoli. I appreciate you reminding me to hydrate. I'm sorry that Twitch chat wasn't coming through for me. Huh. So yeah, long story short, please call me Vikram or Vic for short. I would really appreciate that. It may change again in the future, but for now, this is what I'm happy with and what I've kind of settled on, and I'm gonna roll with it until a point in time happens where I'm not happy with it, and I can't keep waiting around to feel 100%. You know what I mean? Tune says having a lazy Sunday as I do most Sundays. That's nice. I always also like having lazy Sundays. Vikram sounds cool. Thank you. Just to slightly correct you, it would be Vikram. Definitely pronounce the way that you're spelling it. Kind of said more like Vikram, but spelled with an A instead of a U. So yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for listening to me. I've been talking for like more than an hour at this point. I really appreciate y'all hanging out with me this evening and spending the time. I was kind of thinking like, oh, maybe we'll like play Paper Mario for a little bit afterwards, but to be completely honest, I'm kind of exhausted. Like this was a little bit of an emotional talk, so I'm a little tired. Yes, Vikram, you got it right. That's exactly correct. Thank you. Feels good to let this out and knowing people are listening. Yeah, absolutely. It feels really good. I was really scared to tell people. And like I know that most people that I am going to tell are going to be supportive. So it's not necessarily like, oh, I'm scared of people being angry or rejecting me or whatever. It's sort of less that, but I feel like asking something like this just feels very selfish, and sometimes like I can feel a little bit guilty when it comes to like asking for things. But that's just again one of those like people pleasing tendencies that I have to try to let go of, right? Like I can't bend myself into pretzels for the sake of other people's comfort, and this is my name, you know? This is like something that is a very big part of my life, and so I can't have that be something that I compromise to other people. So yeah, definitely feels good to tell more people, even if it can be kind of scary to ask people for things. All right. Feeling all good? Feeling all right? Let me think. Is there anything else that I wanted to talk about before I kind of wrap things up? I'm probably unfortunately going to be busy again next week. So I probably won't be able to stream next week, but I genuinely really do want to stream more Paper Mario. It's like something that I obviously have been wanting to play since they announced the game, and I just like have not had the time or energy or headspace really to play the game or stream much. But I really would like to continue. And like I said, I'm trying to come up with some plans for my birthday next month, and so we'll definitely do a stream or something for that. When exactly it will be, I'm not too sure yet, but I'll keep y'all updated. And we'll try to find some time in the meantime as well too. I'm sure like maybe the first or second week of September we can find some time to do another stream, play more Paper Mario. I think that would be very nice. All right. Thank you all again for hanging out with me for this hour. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I think that's gonna be about it for now. Uh yeah, I'll keep you updated on future streams. I will let you know. Keep you updated on the video progress as well too. That is still coming along slowly but surely. So it'll happen when it happens. Everything on its own time, you know. I'm trying also not to rush myself or get too hard on myself for taking my time. So it'll happen all in due time. Yeah, thanks, Tune. Thanks for hanging out. Have a good night. Thank you, Shia and Magical as well for hanging out in the chat. Anyone else that may have popped in to lurk around for a little bit, thank you. I appreciate you. Stay safe and take care, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and end it here. So I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.